Hi, it's Cameron Reynolds. I just got a question in my Cameron Reynolds Facebook group, and I thought about typing out an answer, but I'm like, you know what? I've been doing emails all day for the Bee Expo. I really just want to talk bees with somebody. I wasn't able to get into my hives today. It was a beautiful day. And so I'm going to talk to you about this guy's question. His question is about information on wax foundation and also pros and cons and where to source it. So let's start with sourcing it. I get mine from Man Lake. Last I heard, they're still using Mr. Kelly's, that's Walter T. Kelly's machine that he designed to make wax foundation. That machine's probably made enough to cover the state of Kentucky or more. And he was such a pioneer and a legend, one of the greats. And so this foundation right here, that's where it comes from. And I typically don't use this anymore except for videos. But there's a lot of beekeepers who don't want to use plastic foundation, want to be as natural as possible, and that's fantastic. This is the primary reason. Ooh, wait, get a look at myself twice. Nice. Oh boy. So this is, there we go, some comb honey. It's a little bit of a thinner piece, but I put this extra thin, not this sheet right here. This is a pretty thick sheet. There's some super thin foundation that I get from Man Lake that is for comb honey. And you can put a full sheet in a medium frame. I prefer a shallow frame. And then you can cut that out into a 2x4 section like this one, or a 4x4 section. And I'm going to leave some links into some videos. I've done some on this, and Frederick Dunn has a great video. I'm going to talk about it in the future of this video. So I get the thin foundation. That's what I primarily use in the wax foundation department. And I found that their foundation works really good. It smells awesome and does a good job for me. Now, pros and cons, pros and cons. If you're doing this for brood comb, there's a lot of pros to plastic, but a lot of people just don't want to do it. So if you're going to do wax foundation, the main thing you've got to watch out for is it cupping. And in heat, even just the heat of the colony, you'll get some warpage, and it's going to do something like this right here. And that's a problem because you have 10 frames in there. And then if you have one going this way and then you rotate one around by accident and it's going the opposite direction or the same direction, you're going to have gaps that are too wide and gaps in between combs that are too narrow. And this is going to cause you to have problems. The bees are going to build cross comb and burr comb, and that's going to end up making it harder for you to pull frames apart. And also it's going to lead to you crushing bees, which is going to lead to you getting stung more often and the bees not having a good day, and everyone does not benefit from that situation. How do we prevent this? This foundation has wires in it, and it does provide some rigidity, but it's really not enough for that, especially on a deep comb. Now, if you're doing mediums for brood chambers, you probably don't need to do this. And what I'm referring to is cross-wiring your foundation. And so Frederick Dunn has a great video on it. I'm going to leave a link down below. You can do it by hand or use a wire embedder. If you're doing a lot of this, a wire embedder is the only way to go, in my opinion. And when I was doing this, when I first got into beekeeping, at the bottom of a frame, sometimes it's tough being short, you will basically go in, put a nail here, go through the hole in the end bar and run it up, run it back down, come in the hole, go across, and then nail over here and have that wire pulled as tight as possible. And then you're going to either roll that, push it into with a hand tool to embed that into the wax, or you're going to use an electric wire embedder. And that really is going to provide some rigidity, and it's going to keep these things straight, and that's going to make your beekeeping better and provide a lot of strength for extraction, especially if you are extracting out of deep frames. Now, if you're extracting mediums, I recommend you wire those in as well. It makes a big difference. The last thing you want is to do all that work and then you sling the frames a little too fast with all that honey weight, and then it's called a blowout, and it just blows the comb right out of the frame, and now it's ruined. And that kind of stinks. You got to start all over again. So cross wiring makes a tremendous difference on how much strength and rigidity that you have. And so that video of Fred's will be tremendously helpful. One of the other problems that you can have with wax foundation, and this is universal between plastic or this, is it's a dearth period. your bees don't consider this comb. They're not going to take care of this. They're looking at, is this useful as an asset in any way? Nope, we can't store anything in it. There's no flow going on. We don't need to draw comb anywhere. This isn't our comb. This isn't an asset. How can we turn it into something useful? At least that's the way I think they're looking at this, is how is this an asset to us? And what they do is they'll chip away out of this at this during a dearth period. They do it with plastic foundation too. If, let's say you're Tennessee, in my area, my flow's done by the second week of June. If I leave a box of this foundation in there and for 2 months they have nothing to do, what do you think they're going to do with that? They're going to chew all of this up. And I remember the first time this happened to me as a hobby beekeeper. And I was just like, what in the world's going on? This is so annoying. That's a lot of money and time that I just put into this. And all I've got left is wires, basically. What in the world? And I didn't see a bunch of wax outside of the front. The bees are mixing this with bee glue and creating, or propolis and making bee glue, or they're using it and repurposing it for wax further in the brood chamber, because as they cap brood, they've got to put some wax on top of that capped brood, and they will pull it off a foundation, absolutely. So if it's plastic foundation, you can just reapply another coat of wax. But if it's this, you just lost that foundation. So keep in mind that all foundation, wax or plastic, if there's a dearth period and you're not feeding and the bees aren't growing and pushing forward, they are just going to chip all the wax either off of the plastic foundation, or they're just going to take all of this off the wires and you'll have nothing left. And so that's a little disappointing. I think that the bees are pretty neck and neck on what they draw the fastest if everything is ideal. If you have a fresh thing of foundation, wax foundation like this, the bees will draw this really good. If you got a good queen laying hard and the bees are really pushing forward and they have enough flow going on, they'll draw this out lickety split. But they'll do the same thing with plastic foundation as long as it has a good uniform coat. Sometimes you don't get that, especially if you get the cheap kits out of TSC, Amazon, and all this stuff where sometimes you wonder, sometimes they're not using true beeswax. The bees won't want to draw it properly, or the coating's not good enough. They really skimp on the beeswax on the plastic. You don't have to worry about that with this. This is solid beeswax, and the bees will like it. As when if they're ready to draw, they're going to take to it fast. And so I do like it for that. Now, as a person who raises queens, and I like to mark most of mine, wax foundation makes life harder with catching queens, finding queens, and also swarm cells. So what happens when they draw this out? Because they can chip away at this, bees often chip away at the edges, and they also chip away at the bottom. And it's not a lot, but it's enough for a bee or two to be able to get through at a time. And the bees like this for, probably efficiency or whatever, just because they do it. With wax foundation, they may not draw all the way to the bottom sometimes, but it's solid plastic. And so if a queen is trying to get away from me, like they often try to do, they go for the corners. And the plastic really helps make sure that they don't go through all these nooks and crannies. So that's one reason why a lot of professional beekeepers like the plastic, is it helps us with that. The other thing it really helps us with not doing wax foundation is when we're looking for swarm cells to try to cut those out and keep the colony from swarming. Maybe they're not capped yet, and we're trying to go through and find all the swarm cells. Well, when you have places all over the sides and the bottom, tons of places to produce those, it's a lot easier for them to not only make a few more of them, but primarily just hide them better. They're harder to spot. There's a lot more area they could be over, especially on the sides of the, foundation. So that is a negative for people who are wanting swarm control, but it's actually a positive for people who are wanting to cut swarm cells out. Say you're a small beekeeper with, 50 hives or less, and you want to just not buy queens because they're darn expensive. And honestly, what you can produce yourself and let the bees do themselves are pretty good, pretty darn good. And I wouldn't worry about, swarming genetics so much. Just enjoy beekeeping. It doesn't have to be ideal as far as in the traditional sense. Heck, you're already doing wax foundation. Obviously, you're not trying to do it the traditional way that we do it now. So you have all these cells that can be on the sides and the bottoms. And the nice thing about the wax foundation is you can easily more easily. Cut this out. And now you can make a bunch of splits with these little cutouts of these swarm cells that are capped. Make a split here, make a split here, and maybe get 15 queen cells. And there are beekeepers that do this on purpose. They use wax foundation, and they will purposefully get that colony to make cells, and they just time it before any of them hatch. And they go through there when they're capped, and they cut those out, and they make up their 2-frame, 3-frame splits and put a queen cell or two. I prefer in this case to put 2 queen cells in there just in case something happens, but one can definitely work just fine too. And now you have some naturally raised and mated queens, and it's so much easier to cut those out with wax. There's some neat units out there online, especially in Europe and other countries, not here in the US, where people make molds where you can pour in your own beeswax and make your own foundation. So I love this about beekeeping. There's people that do top bars and horizontal AZ hives. I just love good bee husbandry. I don't like to see people lose bees. It is part of the game. You're going to lose some bees, but I don't want to see people who are trying to be successful and they're not successful. Losing bees is part of keeping bees, but if we can triple our operation in a year and lose half, we're still ahead. I think splitting is fundamental. Bee husbandry is fundamental. And many times we get away from that. That's just my personal opinion, but I love seeing people do unique things like all wax foundation. The only people that get on my nerves are the ones who really just get high and mighty about being a special breed of beekeeper that have all the best things and everyone else is doing it wrong. No, enjoy it. The uniqueness is truly the spice in beekeeping that makes it interesting. And I want to hear from you in this video if you use wax foundation, and let me know, because I think it's cool. And I don't have time for it. Personally, it saves me so many hours a year not having to wire this in. I only use wax foundation for either videos, primarily just for comb honey. And I don't raise a lot of comb honey, just a handful of boxes a year. So I'm a novice when it comes to it. Thanks for watching this video. If you made it through this whole thing, you're hardcore. Just understand that this is a journey. It takes time. You're going to be successful at this if you keep at it. If I can be successful in beekeeping, you definitely can be successful in beekeeping. And there's a lot of rewards, not just monetary, to being successful with beekeeping. A lot of health benefits mentally and physically and taste bud wise with being a successful beekeeper. Thanks for watching this video and helping me get away from my emails. Now back to work. See you in the next video.